Welcome back, folks, here for the Believe in NFL Draft Prospects podcast. We're coming at you with a Week 3 Stock Watch podcast. I'm Joe DeLeon, joined by two NFL draft analysts, Ryan Roberts and Alex Gilstrap, part of riseanddraft.com if you're looking for in-depth analysis and also a fantastic database, the best database out there. Head on over to riseanddraft.com. So today, folks, we are 3 weeks into college football. That means it's a perfect timing to do a Stock Watch episode. We're going to do this every few weeks, probably every 3 weeks, maybe a little bit more. Once we have a comfortable sense of some of these recognizable prospects that we can dive into and provide some feedback on, and also just share our general thoughts on guys that are doing well enough that they've put themselves in a strong perspective or in a very questionable one. Before we get into that, though, folks, I just need to really quickly tell you about Bet Online. We're back and better than ever. All eyes are on the gridiron as teams are back onto the start to start another football season. As always, Bet Online is your number one sport for all of the pro and college football action this season, with a new updated site and interface, even more odds, props, and contests. Bet Online continues to be the number one source for everything football. Head to their website or use your mobile device to sign up today to receive your 100% welcome bonus. That's double your initial deposit just by signing up. Don't forget to use promo code NFL100. BetOnline, the fastest and easiest way to bet on all of your favorite sports. BetOnline, your online sportsbook experts. All right, guys, how's everybody doing? It's a great Sunday that we're hopping in here to record the show. How are you guys doing? Alex just got back from rafting. How was that?
Man, it was fun. Never been whitewater rafting before, but it was pretty fun. It was cold. It's not probably the best season to be whitewater rafting, but it was a lot of fun.
Ryan doesn't seem entertained.
No, we went up to North Carolina, so it was a little bit of a longer trip.
I was about to say nothing good happens in Georgia, so.
Yeah, in Georgia, you get to see Stetson Bennett play quarterback. That's
dude, probably the best quarterback rating of all time, though, Stetson Bennett. So,
and that's all he's gonna ever get to put up on his wall is the best quarterback rating of all time in a random college game. So today we're talking about accomplishments in a way where we're going to be discussing first stock up guys that have really proved themselves as top players in this class, or just at least put themselves on a bigger radar. We're not talking too many quarterbacks today, if any. But I want to head to Alex first for the first time. Alex, you went with Jaquan Brisker as your first stock up guy. I need to hear why as he's your pick.
Yeah, well, I'm not to spoil anything, but there's a common denominator for all of our stock watch up guys between me and Ryan, and we'll get into that as we kind of talk about each one. But Jaquan Brisker, safety, Penn State. Simply put, Penn State's probably had the hardest schedule to this point in college football, playing Wisconsin at Wisconsin week 1, and then, of course, having Auburn this past weekend come into their house. He simply has just been making plays left and right, and especially as the game nears close, he seems to have that clutch factor. He had the game-winning interception against Wisconsin as they were in the red zone in their drive to kind of put themselves on top. Had that key interception jumping the seam right over the middle, and then here in the Auburn game, he made the pass deflection, almost had another interception to end the game on the last play of the game against Auburn. And outside of those two plays, he's just been a versatile chess piece, whether he's playing man up. I saw this a lot against Auburn, playing man up, press coverage on the slot, and seemed to have, very, very good success at that point, in that position. And he's just really been physical, and he's been showcasing his ability to make plays on the football. And, we talked a lot about Verone McKinley out of Oregon, had another great week this week. Just this safety class is really, really shaping up to be a historic one for, that position group specifically. So Jaquan Brisker, and I had to give a little shout out. We talked a lot about him last week, Verone McKinley, but you could definitely put him in this category as well.
Did we pick all Big Ten players?
That's it. That's the common denominator.
Oh my God, I think we did. Well, no. There's one guy that's a Big 12/SEC player that Alex picked.
Well, no, for the stock ups though.
Oh, you might be correct. I believe you are correct. Yes.
Yes. As soon as Alex said it, I was trying to figure out what the common denominator was, and then that obviously popped out.
Yeah.
That's interesting. I'd like to mention of Verone McKinley. He was actually a guy that I was considering doing for the stock up, just because, I think it's for much more from a national media perspective, because I think I gave him an early 3. I think that he's firmly in the day 2 category. So is he really stock up comparative to where maybe some people have him? Maybe not. But from a national media perspective, I think not enough people know about Verone McKinley. But as far as Brisker, I think he's really interesting. I don't know if you got this vibe, Alex, but like watching him just kind of in real time, it's a little bit of a lazy comp to a degree because they both played at the same college. But he reminded me a little bit of Adrian Amos that came out of Penn State a little bit. Like true 2-high guy. I don't think that you could ever pencil him in perfectly as a strong safety or as a free safety. Like he is a multiplicative, versatile piece on the back end that you mentioned the plays that he's able to do, whether it's in man at times in the slot or playing that mid hole and having the interception against Wisconsin late in the game. Like he's asked to do a little bit of everything for Penn State. He has a good physical profile. He brings some thump in the run game. So I think he's a very interesting football player as a guy that's like that real 2-high safety that can roll down, can roll back over top, play some middle of the field, but probably more of a short zone type of man safety at the next level. So a really interesting guy. I took my first guy to the offensive line for Minnesota, Daniel Falele, who was a guy that we've been talking about for a couple of years because 2019 was his second full year as a start, or 2019 was his second full year as a starter after playing a ton as a true freshman. So heading into the 2021 process, or the 2020 season, a lot was expected of him because he's 6'8", 6'9", listed 300 pounds. I think is verified as a hair over 6'8", and he's got 35-inch arms. So he is a humongous guy. He was 400 pounds apparently as a true sophomore going into his junior year. With everything that happened COVID-19 related, Big Ten related, he ended up opting out of the 2020 season, comes back this year, and he has a huge weight loss. I think he's playing right around 370 pounds, so he lost like 30 pounds heading into the 2021 season. And I have to be honest, like going into last year's cycle, I didn't love the tape going back to 2019. I wasn't a fan. I really wasn't. I understood the tools, and I understand that those tools are going to get him drafted high. And I think he had a mid-second round grade from Blesto coming into the season. So he's well regarded already, despite not playing last season. But I just actually got done like a couple minutes ago, the Ohio State game. And I must say, the first game of the season, he is a completely different football player than he was a couple years ago, which is to be expected for a guy came over from Australia, played at IMG Academy for 2 seasons, but technically 1 true playing at IMG Academy. So he's brand new to football. He's only been playing a couple years, and he was dominant against Ohio State, to be honest, man. He was displacing gaps. They weren't able to get around him in pass protection. He's got a really smooth kick slide. They asked him to 45-degree set, vertical set, power. He does a little bit of everything. And it's still not perfect, but the improvements that I saw from 2019 to where we are now after missing a season, I think this kid has first-round potential. I think it is absolutely there. I think second round might be a little low because if he shows this improvement throughout the entirety of the season, combined with the physical traits he has, I mean, this kid is 6'8" plus, 370 with vines, and he can move. This guy's not just a big dude. Like, he is a really nice mover. I think a lot of guys are probably going to see Jordan Mailata, who starts for the Eagles now at left tackle, from a size perspective, from a just projection perspective, because he's also an Australian that was late to the game. So I was a fan of what I saw from Falele. I think that he had great improvements, and I'm excited to see him. He passed the test against Ohio State with a couple talented pass rushers. Excited to see the rest of the Big Ten slate and hopefully a bowl game against another good opponent, because I think that he is really passing the test so far early in the season.
Yeah, you said he wasn't perfect, and simply put, when you have the size and the physical tools that you kind of touched on there, you don't really have to be perfect, and I think that's why you've seen such early success in 2021. He's been, over the last couple of years, one of the more interesting obvious NFL prospects that we knew we were going to, have to keep an eye on over the next couple of years because, like you said, he very raw at the position, has only played football for a couple of years, starting at IMG late in his football career. Kind of you saw some of that rawness, and he's didn't play the 2020 season, so there's been a lot of question marks and a lot of interesting intricacies with his career to this point.
10 times fast.
Yeah, right. Yeah, that's gonna be a tough one. But he's been such an interesting study, and like you said, it wasn't perfect in the Ohio State game, but you saw a lot of technical improvements in his game, and you touched on what brought him to the limelight. A couple years ago, going in. As he was kind of coming up as a young guy at Minnesota, was his size, 6'9", 400 pounds. Like that's what he was listed at. And that's just absurd. I mean, we talked about Mekhi Becton just a couple years ago being a humongous offensive tackle. And what was he, 365? Like,
6
he was
7.
Yeah, something in that ballpark coming out. So we're talking about someone that, had 35 pounds on him at one point. And like you touched on, he lost some weight. And you kind of see that in his ability to move a little bit better. He seemed to fight power for power very well in 2019, the last time we saw him going into this season, but he really, really struggled against more of those athletic outside track rushers that we like to talk about. And I think, that cut of weight that you touched on there is something that has been really beneficial to him in trying to, garner that next step in his development. And he's looked really good. You have the physical tools that you have, and knowing that he's only played football for now, 4 years or so, 4 or 5 years. I mean, this guy's going to be a really interesting study, and I'm confident that there's going to be offensive line coaches and offensive coordinators in the NFL that are going to rave about this guy and want this guy in their building because they think that they have what it takes to get this guy to be an NFL All-Pro.
And I think he's a redshirt junior technically with the COVID year and all that good stuff, but I will say I think he was an early enrollee, so I really hope that he is a graduate in December because I want to see him in Mobile. I think that would be a fantastic, because there's a couple nice pass rushers. Zach Harrison in the Big Ten, talking about George Karlaftis and Aidan Hutchinson, all these dudes, but I just want to see him against as much outside track rushers like you're talking about. I want to see him against speed because those guys are more based upon power. I think he'll do well against Karlaftis, and I think he'll do well against Aidan Hutchinson because they're built off of power, and Zach Harrison even to a degree. I want to see him against those really loose, flexible outside rushers that have a lot of bend. I think that's a big test for him.
So speaking on two guys that you just mentioned, we're going to end up talking about both of them. But the first one that Alex highlighted here, Aidan Hutchinson, this one's, I think, pretty obvious for performance over the past 3 weeks. He has been highly talked about, it feels like, by everybody. And understandably, the three teams that they've played, Western Michigan should probably dominate in that scenario. Northern Illinois should probably dominate. But the way that he played against Jaxson Kirkland, and we talked a ton last week on that performance against Jaxson Kirkland, who is supposed to be this super talented offensive tackle from Washington, and he absolutely balled out. But now here we are talking again about Aidan Hutchinson, who decided to go back, and that ultimately might help his draft stock. And we're talking about him again on week 3. Alex, why'd you pick him?
Yeah, I mean, you hit it perfectly. It's really comes down to that performance that everyone in the draft community was keying in on, and that's Aidan Hutchinson versus Jaxson Kirkland. This is a matchup, Pac-12 versus Big Ten. You don't see very often, so that already created some buzz. But when you have a prospect battle of two guys that I think are a consensus first round, matchup, if you take the law of average, if you get the average. Kind of evaluation there, Aidan Hutchinson simply took his lunch money. And I know we talked about it already, but this is someone that, week in and week out has shown that not only does he have the hand usage and the pass rush moves to get free and keep his chest clean, that like we saw with Jaxson Kirkland, but this is someone that's has shown the ability to be a flexible athlete, and we talked about this at length last week, me and Ryan did. So I don't want to go too deep into Aidan Hutchinson, but this is someone that we definitely have to talk about when we're talking about stock watch up, because this is someone that has dominated his biggest matchup to this point, and there's going to be a couple more times throughout this season he's going to face Rasheed Walker in Penn State, which is someone that people really, really like. Penn State's tackle there, and Ohio State tackles at the end of the year. He's going to have a chance to continue to build on that momentum that he's already created for himself early on in this season by continuing to go up against NFL talent at the offensive tackle position. And if he continues to play at the high level that he has to this point in the season throughout those matchups as well, this is going to be a bona fide top 15 guy.
Yeah, I think that Aidan Hutchinson is just kind of fulfilling everything that most of us thought about him, which is he has tremendous length. He has a great power profile. He can play up and down the line of scrimmage. I don't think he is a true 7-9 tech where like, hey, he is going to play on the outside shade all the time and he is going to be that true outside track guy. Like, I don't think that that's him. But I did hear a great comp on Fran Duffy and Ben Fennell's podcast where Ben compared him, stylistically speaking, to J.J. Watt, who he is not your tradition. Like, he can play 9 and 7 at points, but he's going to play 5. He's going to play 4-eye. He's going to play inside of 3 at times. Like, that's what Aidan Hutchinson brings to this football game, and that's what he brings to a team potentially is alignment versatility, rush versatility. That is his biggest selling point. And the ability for him to win against a guy like Jaxson Kirkland, who was a lot of hype. I think maybe some of it was a little overstated, to say the least, and I'm going to talk about him in a little bit, not to let the cat out of the bag a little too early, but I do think that he has done everything that he needs to do coming back from the injury at the end of the year without Kwity Paye on the other side of him. The microscope is firmly on him, and he passed what is probably his biggest test all year. So good for Aidan Hutchinson. I think that he showed exactly what we thought of him going into last season before he decided to come back after the injury. Doesn't really change my opinion on him a ton, but he is definitely taking advantage of the opportunity so far.
So, Ryan, you've already clearly illustrated the guy that you're going to end up talking about as your last stock up player. He hasn't necessarily been tested from the first 2 opponents that he faced, Oregon State and Purdue. Notre Dame was probably this past week was probably the closest you're going to get from actually testing him. He's going to get the opportunity to face some really good ranked teams in Iowa, in Wisconsin, and also Ohio State. But George Karlaftis looked very good against Notre Dame yesterday, and we exchanged a few messages when we were watching the game. Why did you pick him as your stock up?
I actually put, and this is awesome because me and Alex didn't talk about this, right? Like, we just put it right in the doc. This is fantastic. Not only that we're talking about these guys back to back because they're both Big Ten guys, they both have that power profile, and they're both going to be compared a little bit down the stretch here. They absolutely are going to be compared, for one. And then, again, a coincidence here is a few days even before the game, I said, who would you prefer? Mm-hmm. George Karlaftis, or would you prefer Aidan Hutchinson? Aidan Hutchinson won that poll that I put up. It was pretty close. I think it was like 53-47. So it was a pretty close poll. But for me, it's not even close, man. I'll be honest. It's not even close. George Karlaftis, I think people have forgotten because he comes into his freshman year at Purdue, dominates, 17 tackles for loss, 7.5 sacks, fantastic stuff. He looks like he's the next big thing. And then 2020 happens, abbreviated season, fighting injury, fighting COVID. He only plays in a couple football games, still has production, but also Purdue decided to go from a 4-man front to a 3-man front in 2020 for whatever reason. So he's playing like a base 3-4 defensive end, which didn't make any logical sense. This year, they're back to a 4-3. And I'll be honest, the first couple games, didn't watch much of him, just in passing a little bit. And he was very disruptive. But I think people are kind of overanalyzing the fact that he did not record a sack in the first 2 games. And they're like, what is going on? But I think he had 12 or 13 pressures. So he's disrupting the game. There's no doubt about it. He just hasn't recorded a sack. But he goes into this Notre Dame game, and all the things that I love about George Karlaftis was on full display against Josh Lugg, specifically the right tackle for Notre Dame, who was in 5th-year senior. So he's kind of been around the block a little bit, first full year as a starter. But it's not like he's a freshman that was just thrown into the fire against George Karlaftis. George Karlaftis is 6'4", 280 pounds. Physical profile, obviously, he is a true power rusher. He is a converter, and there's no doubt about that. But then he's got a little more looseness than you think, and he's got some closing burst that is unreal for a guy that size. And you saw it was almost back-to-back plays where he got lunging on one. He shows a little bit of hip flexibility. He's able to just do a quick arm over, get easy pressure, gets a big hit on Jack Cohn. It was like 2 snaps later. 2 pass rush snaps later, I think the next one he forced him out of the pocket, so he did his job. Joe thinks that he got pancaked, but like in reality,
he did get pancaked. He did do his job, but he
really,
Joe, put on his ass.
Not really, Joe. No, Joe, because Cohn broke the pocket. If he didn't break the pocket, he never would have gotten put on the ground. I don't want to hear about it.
He still got put on the ground, though. That's get put on the ground. Get put on the ground.
No. You're a long snapper. You don't get it. You'll never understand.
Getting put on the ground is getting. I totally get it.
No.
Getting put on the ground is getting put on the ground.
Anyway, so he did his job on that snap. Then I think it was a very nice pass rush snap, man. He went 3 steps up the arc, and he put his outside foot in the ground, and he absolutely annihilated, went straight down Lugg's chest and put him flat on his back for the sack. And he was like that all day in the run game, in the pass game. He was a menace, man. And I am telling you right now, do not look at the box score and compare these 2 football players and say, slam dunk Aidan Hutchinson, man. Go watch George. He is disruptive. And the difference between the fact is that Michigan has a more talented defense. Like, let's call it what it is. George Karlaftis is the dude. Everybody knows he's the dude. He is the main focal point. The first play against Notre Dame, they put a tight end on him, and then they also chipped him with a running back on the very same play. So they basically had 3 guys predicated to stop one football player on Purdue. I'm here to tell you, George Karlaftis, top 10 player in the 2022 class, Joe DeLeon, top 10 football player. Fantastic.
I'm not disagreeing with that. He got put on his ass. That's
I don't want to hear it, man.
You can be a top 10 player and get put on your ass. It's possible.
Context.
Y'all are funny, man. No, I like it. And it's really good you have to, everything has context, like you said. And we talked about this a lot last year. And let's go back to last year. Jason Owe or Odafe Owe, whatever his name
When
is.
did that happen, by the way?
I think it was like right after he got drafted, he changed what he wanted to be called. So Jason Odafe Owe, didn't record a sack in the 2020 season and was a first-round pick because of traits and obviously pressures were not an issue for him. Comes in week 1 of his NFL debut against the Vegas Raiders, has 2 quarterback hits, a sack. He records his first NFL sack. It was never an issue about getting in, creating disruption and getting in the backfield. Sometimes things just don't go your way. And to this point, like you said, with Karlaftis, it just hasn't gone his way as far as the box score goes, but he has been a disruption to this point. I haven't watched too much of it, but if you look at the numbers, he's, like you said, he's at a dozen or so quarterback pressures on the year. So, Karlaftis is someone that we all knew was going to be a dominant force in college football this year. He hasn't quite got the box score going quite yet, but it'll come. It's Karlaftis. He's a great college football player. Like you said, he's a first round caliber football player, undoubtedly. You're talking about top 10. That very well may be the case. So, but 1st of October, he has Daniel Falele and Karlaftis are going to go head to head. So you're 2 stock up guys. Someone's going to come out of that a winner and someone's going to come out a loser. I'm excited to see what's made of that.
All right, we're going to get to some stock down, guys. Before we do, though, folks, I just want to tell you about Play Action Pools, which is a fantastic contest that we're doing here at Believe. We're partnering with PlayActionPools.com this season to bring you some interactive fun to the sport that we love most. You'll be able to get in on the action with our PlayActionPools.com Football Pick'em Challenge, which is open to everyone. Sign up for our contest, Believe Football Pick'em at PlayActionPools.com. And then get your picks in each week. We're going to select the 10 highest profile games of the week between the NFL and college football. Whoever gets the most picks correct each week will win a pair of electric sunglasses and a pair of DC shoes. Again, go to playactionpools.com and sign up for the contest, Believe, BLEAV, Football Pick'em. And if you plan on hosting your own football contest, go to playactionpools.com today. They've got Survivor, Pick'em, as well as a cool sportsbook-style concept called Build Your Bankroll. PlayActionPools.com, your new home for all of your office sports pools. All right, guys, stock down. Let's get to a few players that catch your eye. And, in terms of negative impacts, Alex, you decided to go with a player that has generated some buzz, Demarvion Overshown, who comes in as a talented player for Texas. They've played only one real reputable team. Louisiana and Rice are the two non-recognizable ones, but Arkansas was a game where a guy like him was supposed to step up. Why did you pick him for stock down?
So, like you said, Rice, Louisiana, Lafayette, didn't really watch those games, but the one game that I feel like a lot of people watched and a lot of people are going to circle and come back to when evaluating Overshown and, the players on this Texas team is the Arkansas game. That's been the big game to this point. There's some playmakers on the offensive side of the football at Arkansas, obviously, SEC team. They're going to want to see how he did there. And I watched the majority of that game, and he's credited with 4 missed tackles. I can't believe it's not 10. I feel like every single time I saw him in position to make a play, he did not finish the play. He was missing tackles left and right. So 4 missed tackles in that game. He came into it. He's a safety convert. We've talked about him before. He was someone I was low on coming into the year when we were talking about the linebacker show. Someone that I just didn't get the hype with. And look, he's small. He's supposed to be this playmaker, this Isaiah Simmons, this Jeremy Chin. That's what everyone wants to be nowadays is that mold of player. And I think that's what they're trying to do for Overshown. And that's what people that are creating hype for Overshown are looking at him as, is that next guy. But I see him more as a tweener than a versatile playmaker, if that makes any sense. He has the size of a safety. He just, at his length, 223 pounds isn't bad, but when you're 6'4" with vines, like, he's just thin. He's frail, and you see that when he goes to make plays, on ball carriers as a tackler, and he just does not finish plays with physicality very well at all. There's someone that, he's a pretty good defender. He's got, like I said, great length and everything else. Coverage defender, I should say, but linebacker, first job. We talked about this a couple years ago, Ryan, when me and you first started getting off. It's like, what is a linebacker's primary job? And his primary job is to fill the run, to fulfill his duties as a run defender, because a linebacker is a run defending, defender first before he's trying to work in the pass game. And obviously, the rise of some of these linebackers, Darius Leonard, Fred Warner, some of these smaller guys that just do so well in coverage have kind of been at the forefront of your mind as far as like the modern NFL linebacker. It still doesn't take away the fact that he has to be a physical presence in the run game, and he just isn't at this point. Like I said, 4 missed tackles he's credited with against Arkansas. It felt like so much more. This is someone that seemed to be exposed in that SEC matchup, play in and play out throughout the entirety of the game. So I just have not seen the physical growth that I was hoping to see from the 2020 season to the 2021 season. And I'm seeing a lot of the same stuff that I saw over the summer that made me lower on him than the rest of the crowd.
I've had this debate along for several years, kind of like what you're saying. We talked about it a couple years ago. Linebackers have to stop the run, man, to get drafted high. They have to. I mean, you just this past year, I think it's a perfect example. Everybody lost their minds over Jabril Cox and Baron Browning. They lost their minds. Oh, they could be first-round picks. They could be this. They could be that. They were coverage-specific linebackers who can't stop the run. And guess what? The NFL didn't value those guys until the 3rd round. They didn't value them until then, man, because at core, to be drafted high as a linebacker, you have to be able to impact every down. If you can't, then you're not getting drafted high. And I think that's where we're at with Overshown. I had a 3rd round grade for him. I think the tools are fantastic, but I don't think that he's a guy that's going to rise into a top 45, 50 player. I don't think that that's in the cards for him unless he has a massive improvement towards the latter stages of the season, because at the end of the day, he is a liability currently on running downs. There is potential. There is things to work with. But right now, I don't see a chance that he gets drafted high.
So I hate to, while you were talking, I pulled this up. PFF grade for the Arkansas game, 30.2 overall defensive
Lord.
grade. Obviously, PFF grades aren't everything, but 30.2 is telling to how bad he looked in that game, in my opinion.
So I'm curious the PFF grade for Mr. Jaxson Kirkland, who Ryan is about to bring up here as his stock down on the show. Jaxson Kirkland has had limited opportunities to prove himself. Montana and Arkansas State, and the one chance he had to show off and say, hey, look what I can do against a premier NFL pass rusher, Aidan Hutchinson. He completely botched it. So does that fit along the lines of what you're getting at here, Ryan, why you think Jaxson Kirkland has been pretty heavily stocked down so far?
Joe, are you saying that Montana doesn't have any next-level edge defenders?
They have – their whole defense is next-level edge defenders, so don't talk down on Montana.
I wasn't talking down on Montana, man. I love Montana. But yes, to answer your question, I think it was a perfect segue to Jaxson Kirkland because Alex highlighted Aidan Hutchinson. Why did he highlight Aidan Hutchinson? Because in the biggest prospect versus prospect matchup probably to date in this season was Washington offensive tackle Jaxson Kirkland against Aidan Hutchinson from Michigan. Of course, we know who won that battle. And I think, and I remember saying this with our offensive tackle show, there are two guys I said in the offensive tackle class that I am willing to take in the first round right now. And we talked much about this. Sean Ryan and Evan Neal. Those are the two guys. Jaxson Kirkland, I think I had as my offensive tackle 3, but I was day 2 on him. I'm not there with Jaxson Kirkland. And I think that the problems the issues that I have with him, I think were highlighted against Aidan Hutchinson. One, there's no power profile right now for him. Like he cannot counteract the length and physicality that Aidan Hutchinson brought to the game. I don't see it. Now, I think he's a good athlete. I think he's good. I wouldn't say he's great. I think he's a good athlete. I think he's technically sound, but this man needs an overhaul in strength. So while I do think that he does have the potential to rise into a top 35-ish selection, I think that the talent is there. Right now, we saw the problems, the issues. With the Pac-12, you're not seeing a ton of guys that bring a power profile off the edge. In the NFL, you're seeing it every single week. So Jaxson Kirkland's stock down for now. We'll see if he rebounds, but it was a not so flattering showing against Aidan Hutchinson in Michigan.
Yeah, Joe, you asked PFF grade 49.4 in that Michigan game.
Gross.
So as a pass blocking grade. But yeah, it's like you said, just as much as Aidan Hutchinson was a winner coming out of that week, Jaxson Kirkland was a loser, and that's why we're talking about both of these guys. We talked about him a couple weeks ago after that game, or last week after that game, I should say. It's just someone that's going to have to majorly rebound in a Pac-12 where, aside from Oregon and Kayvon Thibodeau, there's not a ton of edge rush. I mean, I guess Drake Jackson. I'm just low.
Don't insult Drake, baby. That's your boy.
It's not my boy. But, you know, there's just week in and week out, you're not going to get the test that Aidan Hutchinson is opposite, you know, looking at offensive tackles from an edge rushing perspective. So Jaxson Kirkland's not going to have quite the opportunity to rebound, but this is someone that's going to have to if he wants to get his name back into that top 32 discussion. But I'm there with you. I had him as OT3 going into the season, but there was a clear division between those top two that you touched on there and Kirkland for me.
All right, folks, I think that's a good note to end us up on. Next week, we're going to probably get back to headlines, but every few weeks or so, we're going to keep doing these Stock Watch episodes. Thank you for tuning in. Hit that subscribe button on YouTube or wherever you're listening to this on your podcast provider. 5-star reviews. Follow us on social media at NFL Prospects Pod, at Rise and Draft, at Joe DeLeon, and at Alex Gilstrap, as well as at Believe Podcasts. We'll talk to you soon, folks. Enjoy the rest of your week.